I'm Tom Hood, CEO of the Maryland Association of CPAs, and I'm here with two of our top tax minds, active volunteers at CPA Day in Annapolis. We just had 200 CPAs down here, and in the midst of that, it's literally history happening here in the Maryland State House. Several major events. The comptroller released a report called the 60-Day Report, which is the effects of the federal tax law revisions on the state of Maryland. And just a couple of minutes ago, the governor had a press conference to talk about how he feels this impact from the federal law on Maryland taxpayers and some of the ideas I think he's talking about doing that. So we were called actually right around the first of the year to ask for some of our top tax minds to meet with legislators at both the governor, the House, and the Senate to give their advice, as well as with the comptroller. And so Karen Syrylo is here on my right, Jeff Lawson here on my left. They've been active members on our state and federal tax arena forever, and they basically went to both of these press conferences. They're going to give you the breaking news.
Well, I thank Tom for those great words, and I hope I live up to them. As he said, we attended two press conferences today. The first was by the Maryland Comptroller, Peter Francho. It was a presentation given by Andy Schaffel from the Maryland Bureau of Revenue Estimates. It was a very detailed approach that they used. Rather than just extrapolating and sampling some data to come up with their estimates, they actually, with their data, were able to model out, using all data that they have, to come up with some very, very good estimates of the impact on Maryland. What's interesting is what they found was that 68% of Marylanders actually will have no impact, positive or negative, on Maryland return from the effects of the new federal tax legislation. 4% actually were going to benefit in Maryland even from this, and the rest were going to have tax increase. So it was roughly 28% of those folks. The rough estimate for just looking at tax year 2018 was about a $438 million tax increase in Maryland, paid by Marylanders. And through the year, in the future years, it was consistent. It went up a little bit each year, but it was around that $440 to $450 million range.
So thanks, Jeff. And that's what the Comptroller's Office, as Jeff says, with the detailed calculations that they did based on actual tax returns, is going to be without any activity on the part of the legislature changing. So that dovetails into the second press conference that we went to today, Jeff and I, where the governor is releasing his summary. We haven't yet seen the language to the bill. That should be out any day now. But the governor summarized for us several basic ideas that his people feel would help deal with at least part of that, if not most of, the impacts on Marylanders. He mentioned three things. One is his proposal is to have Maryland decouple from the federal Internal Revenue Code so that Maryland isn't dealing with this every time there's a federal tax change, and especially looking at the changes that just passed in Washington, having to analyze and decouple from all of them. And his proposal is that we basically permanently decouple from the federal Internal Revenue Code. His second idea is to, because of the changes in the standard deduction and exemptions, would be to allow Marylanders to itemize on their federal return, on their state return, even if they're taking the standard deduction for the federal, because right now we are coupled and you can only itemize on Maryland if you also itemize on federal, and that would take away a lot of the impacts that Jeff mentioned that Andy Schaffel has summarized. And the third item that he mentioned is an understanding that the Comptroller's Office said that there is some ambiguity right now as to the exemptions, that Maryland's code says that you get the number of exemptions on your Maryland return that you claimed on your federal return. And since the language in the federal code wasn't changed, but the number is 0, do you still get a number on your Maryland return or not? There's some ambiguity in the governor is calling on the legislators to put some clarity into the legislation that would clarify that there is a Maryland-based exemption. The other thing that we want MACPA members to know is that Jeff and I and several other of our colleagues, CPAs, have also been involved, as Tom said, in several meetings with the governor's staff prior to his releasing his ideas today, with legislative staff, both House and Senate, as well as the Department of Legislative Services staff, and continuing our relationship with the Comptroller's Office, who of course is preparing themselves for the administrative aspects of whatever comes through from the governors and the legislators' legislation. And we have been told that we will be invited to continue with those discussions as more and more meetings happen. We're just in the beginning of this whole process of passing legislation as Maryland decides how to react to the federal bill, and CPAs are going to be at the table. We've been promised in all of those meetings, so know that we will be representing you and continuing to be technical advisors to the legislators and the governor's staff and the comptroller as this process continues. So stay tuned for news.